All right, so in this video, we are going to be rounding to the nearest whole number. Now you'll notice over here to the side, I have this visual here that reminds us that when a digit that we're rounding has a number to the right of it that has a 0, a 1, 2, 3, or 4, we would say we round down. We'll talk a little bit more about that. If the number is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we would round up. So we're going to use this visual as well as these. So the number lines here you see, this is for tenths. It's from 0 to 1, showing all the tens place. This is 0 to 1 also, but it's showing the hundredths, and the one on the bottom is showing thousands. So we're going to use that to kind of give us a good visual model so we can actually round these and see why we round them up or why we round them down. So again, we're rounding to the nearest whole number. The first whole number is the number that is right next to the decimal place on the left side. So we are going to use, that's the number we're rounding. We're either going to keep it a 1 or we're going to change it to a 2. So it's either going to be a 1, so it would be 31, or it's going to be 32. So when we're doing this, we're going to look at the number next to it. So when the number next to it is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we would say we round up. So we would round up to 32. But let's check it out on the number line. Here we have 75 hundredths. So we're going to go to our hundredths line. And if this is 0 and this is 50, 70 has to be over here. So 70 would be 60, 70 hundredths would be about here. That is why we round up to the hundredths place, because 70 would be over here. So that gives you a visual model. So we would say that this rounded to the nearest whole number would have to be 32 because we would round up to 32 instead of going down to 31. So let's take a look at our next one. We also have hundredths. On this one we have 49 hundredths, but we are rounding the number 6. The number 6 is the number we're rounding. We're either going to keep it a 6 or we're going to round it to a 7. So let's decide by looking at the number next to it. The number next to it is a 4. So we said if the number next to it is 4 or less, we round down. So we would say that 6 is less than 7, so we're rounding down. On a number line, though, if you wanted to find 49 hundredths would be right here just before 50. And anything less than 50 means you will round down. So that's another reason why we would round down to 6. All right, now let's look at a number that's quite a bit larger, and it has 1/10. So we have 319. Now we are rounding to the nearest whole number. So the current number we have is 319. But are we going to round up? Are we going to add 1 and change it to 320? That's what we're trying to decide. So we look at the number next to it. It's a 1. So according to our rules, anytime you have a 1, that means you would round down, but we could also find it on the number line. We have 1/10. So when we come over here to our tenths number line, we see that 1/10 would be here. See how close it is? So that's why we would actually round it down instead of rounding it up. So this answer would be 319. All right, let's take a look at 2 more, and then I'm going to look at a couple that are a little tricky. So let's take a look at 9 and 86 thousandths. Well, we're rounding the whole number, which is the 9. We're going to look at the number next to it. Now, what does 9 and 86 thousandths come in between? Well, I know 9 comes between 9 and 10. So I'm either going to keep the 9 or I'm going to round up to the 10. So we notice that's a 0, which means we are going to round it to 9. But let's take a look at the number line. Are we correct? So we have 86 thousandths. Well, this is 500 thousandths. So if this is 500 thousandths, 86 thousandths would be way down here close to 0. So that's another reason why we are rounding down, because it's actually closer to the 9 than it is to the 10. All right, one more. Let's take a look. What happens when it's smack dab in the middle? So take a look at this. We're rounding the 1. So we're either going to keep it 11 or we're going to round up to 12. So we look at the number next to the ones place, and it's a 5. So let's take a look at our rule. Our rule says if it's 5 or more, we're going to round up. But let's take a look at our number line also. We have a number line here that shows 5/10 is right here. And anytime you're in the middle or higher, you're going to round up. So we would definitely round this to 12. And this one we said was 9. All right, so what happens when you have no whole numbers? Check out these two numbers or decimals here. We have no whole numbers. So we are still going to use the same rule. It's either going to stay a 0 or it's going to become a 1, because what comes after 1, if we round up a 0, it becomes a 1. So we have a 0 here, and we notice that next to it we have another 0. So according to our number line, this is 6/100. So let's find 6/100 on the number line. This is 10/100, 20/100, 30/100, 40/100, 50/100. So 6/100 is way down here, definitely closer to 0. So we would say, if we're rounding that to the nearest whole number, it's actually going to stay a 0. Now let's take a look at the next one. We have an 8. So are we going to keep it a 0, or are we going to round up to the number 1? Because right now we don't have any whole numbers. So according to our rules, we say if it's 8 or more or 5 or more, we're going to round up. And that's definitely 5 or more. So it looks like we're going to round up to the number 1. But let's take a look at our number line. According to our number line, this is 5/10. So we have 0/10, 5/10, and 10/10. So 8/10 would be way over here, which definitely means it's closer to 1. So we would say this rounds to 1. So this is just a brief introduction of how do we round numbers to the nearest whole number when you have a decimal.